Welcome back to the JB Sports Podcast. Today is Friday, January 23rd, and we are back for another pod. If you've been listening for a while, you would know that I'm not usually the person who does the intros here. Jace could not be on today. We have a lot of things going on. We're getting ready for this crazy snowstorm coming up, which if you're listening throughout the country of the United States, you're not somewhere on the West Coast or very on the down south. I think even down south is dealing with this right now, are they? I'm not a meteorologist by any means, and really I don't watch the news at all, especially the weather. I just usually go to my phone app and just see where that goes, even though I know that app is kind of bad all the time and gives you wrong information. That's just where I go. So everything I'm hearing is secondhand, and who knows what the actual truth is, but some bad weather's coming. It's winter time. Here in Ohio, we're going to be getting it here in the next 24 hours or so. So Jace has things to do. But this whole show still has to go on. A pod still has to go out. We have some big football games coming up in the next couple days. Well, on Sunday. So I have to come on here and talk about things I want to talk about. There's plenty of other things too. Some college football topics that I wanted to get into that have come up over the last couple days. Even though it's crazy how college football used to be. As soon as the season was over, it felt like everything would go dormant. For again, maybe this was just me as a child not really paying attention as much and not being into message boards and stuff like that. But ever since the playoffs and all the portal stuff, and it just keeps going, it almost feels like they're taking on an NFL approach of even when games aren't going on, there's newsworthy things to have to keep track of. And unfortunately or fortunately, depending on what side of this you're on, whether you're kind of a bystander to what the news is and you're just kind of bringing it in as it comes, or if you're a fan of such team that's dealing with some of these issues, or if you're one of the teams that again, if you're a part of it, it may be good or bad depending on what the news is, or if you're just outside of it altogether, you kind of just get to watch I'm not going to say college football burn, because I don't think it's burning, but there is some real stupid shit happening right now, and it does potentially affect the long-term viability of the sport when it comes to a lot of the long-standing, really deep-grown-in roots of passion that college football has in people's lives. So, and all the stuff that's happening, I'm not saying, the sport is as good as it's ever been when it comes to product on the field, and we had a really good national championship game for the first time in a while ever since let's just be honest, ever since the playoff format started. This has been the most, this one we just had between Miami and Indiana was the most competitive we've had in pretty much the whole time. So the product on the field is fine, but it's everything outside of what's going on the football field that is really turning a lot of fans off of a lot of the stuff that's going on. And I'm not going to sit here and say all of it is for good reason, because there's some people out there that just doesn't want to see players get paid whatsoever, which is where they're on the bad side of things. They just want to have the illusion of amateurs and stuff like that, just going for school and playing for the pride of your school and for your family. And I'm well, that's unrealistic, right? Especially when so much money is going up over their heads. But there's some people out there that are okay with players getting paid, but they just want to have a little bit of some sort of having a little bit of the attachment you could have to the players and to the teams like you used to have when, people that were crazy about recruiting and all this get to really follow these, because that's what the NFL gives you, is being able to follow a kid going in and enrolling to whatever school you're a fan of or where your alma mater is, and you get see them grow up over 3 to 4 years, kind of grow into being a talented young person, into being a grown-up that's ready for the next level of going to the NFL, or a nobody that you never even heard before coming in and bursting onto the scene and becoming a guy that you really attach yourself to and can have a lot of fun following, not only as a player but as a person over their years of college. So I just feel like they want more of that back, and with a lot of the new changes that have come with the NIL, with the portal and all of that, it has kind of taken away a little bit of that, which does take a little bit of the lifeblood of the sport away. So if one day we will be able to get some changes in to where we can get a little bit of that back again, it'll never go back to what it was before. It won't. That's just not how things go. But if you can just do a few tweaks, we can get a little bit of that back as a sport and as a fan of the sport. It just a few tweaks can help the sport and keep it where it's going right now, where players do get paid, but also add some guardrails so at least us as fans can have a good idea as to what we're getting ourselves into. And like maybe we can get attached to players coming in as high schoolers again and stuff like that. So I just feel like there's a few tweaks that can be made that can help out the college football world as we know it. But again, is it really ever going to happen? I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and like hope and pray. I'm just going to like, take every punch as it comes, but that's the hope that we can get back to, right? That's all we can kind of attach ourselves to and just kind of, ride the wave and hope we can have a fun time while doing it. So without further ado, 5-minute long rant already. I've already told myself before this pod, I didn't want to do this for 2 hours by myself sitting here staring at a wall, but with it being almost 6 minutes now of me just talking and already rambling about, I don't have a lot of confidence in that. So let's go ahead and get to the topics that I wanted to talk about here. We're going to start with college football, and then we're going to go, I have like four or five stories in college football that I wanted to talk about, and then get to that don't include any games, obviously, which is hilarious. And then I have a few NFL topics, and then we're going to cap it all off with the preview and our predictions for the 2 conference championship games that are happening on Sunday for the NFL to see who we're going to see in the Super Bowl. So let's go ahead and not go on about anything else anymore. Let's go ahead and get to what I want to talk about here. So I hate to start with this because it feels like the last 3, 4, 5 pods now, it feels like I come into every single one with like a big problem with NIL and the portal and all of that. And I kind of feel myself, it almost feels like complaining. But because here's the thing, I don't necessarily disagree with players getting paid and having the freedom to do what they're doing. But I do agree with the idea that maybe there needs to be some more guardrails when it comes to making not only teams honor the contracts that they give out to these players, but maybe making some players have to follow the contracts they sign to these teams as well. And it has to go both ways. You can't, I think I said this in a different aspect, but I think it's a saying that's said throughout life and throughout with people, is that right now it feels like the players get all of the freedom, but none of the responsibility. Players get the freedom of getting the money and having opportunity to earn money for yourself and for your family and all of that. Or you get to move and go to a different situation if you think you're not getting the right situation that's going to help you out long-term for your academic or your playing career or for money, and be able to go to a different spot if you see fit, but none of the responsibility of saying if a player signs a contract with a school, they have to honor the contract that they signed. There's been more than a few players during this cycle that have signed contracts with NIL-wise with schools saying they're going to come back, and then they hear from a school saying they're going to, hey, there's other schools like, hey, I'll pay you such and such amount more than what you're already getting if you go into the portal and come with us, even if you just signed your recent deal. And that's where I think something needs to be done to kind of take away that aspect, because at the end of the day, if it was going the other way and schools were taking away money and not willing to pay what they promised a kid they would pay them, even if they were bad, I would be on the other side saying the school you decided to want to give them that amount of money, you have to pay them no matter what, because you had your part in this too. It takes 2 to tango to a certain extent. So I do think players in this spot do need to have a few more guardrails to make them have to, once you sign a contract, honor it. I just feel like it's not necessarily that hard. And I'm not saying that they don't deserve to have the movement they do, but once you pen to paper, you should honor the deals that you sign. And that's true in life for regular adults. Whatever contract you sign, you usually have to do, or there's going to be consequences. And as of right now in college football, there's a lot of players that sign deals and say they're going to do some things, and then they renege on it because other opportunities come their way. And again, this is not all on the player. This is on the families of the player or their teams that are just looking for the next big paycheck or trying to do whatever they want to do to try to get one up in the world by profiting off of a player or their family member or whatever. So this isn't all about the players being terrible or doing a bad job. Sometimes it's people around them as well. So I'm not putting all the blame on them, but there does need to be a few guardrails. And this is where I'll get to the story that I want to talk about today. And this is like might be the last straw for me, to be honest, because if you've been listening to this podcast for a good amount of time, I have made it very clear there is a few people in the college football world that I despise more than Mr. Dabo Swinney, the head coach for the Clemson Tigers. I find him to be very fake. I find him to be, honestly, overall, I just don't think I've ever listened to him totally believed everything he said. When I listen to him talk, I always feel like there's an ulterior motive, or he's trying to skirt some type of responsibility for something that has happened. And it's just feel like I've never gotten a good vibe from Mr. Dabo Swinney whatsoever. And I've always, again, also the fact that he has coached some teams that has done some things to my Buckeyes, which I can totally take account for. Like I may be a little slanted because of what my allegiances lie. But I will say that even without that, Dabo has done some things throughout my time of being a fan and listening to him talk at times, and maybe listen to some things that he has done that has made me feel not so great about Dabo, not necessarily as a person. I'm not saying he's a bad person, but I just feel like I don't find him to be the most genuine at all times, and he likes to act like he is. A little bit of the holier than thou complex he has, and it rubs me the wrong way. So when there is a story that comes out, I think this was today, right? Yeah, it comes out today, and it makes me side with Dabo Swinney. Like, there is a fucking problem if I am ever siding with Mr. Dabo Swinney. So let me get to the story here. Dabo had a 1 hour long news conference today to where he straight up snitched on Ole Miss and their now head coach, Pete Golding, for tampering with one of his players. Okay? And this player is Luke Farrelly, who is a former, I think he played at Cal as a linebacker, I believe. Hold on, let me make sure I'm not crazy. Let's see here. Yeah, linebacker Luke Farrelly, who Dabo recently had gotten out of the transfer portal, which is something, again, I'll get to how big of a deal that is here in a second, but had gotten him out of the transfer portal. He signed an NIL deal, got kind of locked in. He enrolled into classes and started going to classes and doing meetings and stuff and workouts. And this was, let's see here. Let me get to the actual... on the 14th, so more than a week after Farrelly had begun classes at Clemson, Farrelly's agent contacted Clemson general manager Jordan Sorrells to alert him that Ole Miss was going hard after Farrelly. And then Swinney talked to Sorrells, who, Swinney told the GM to go and talk to the Ole Miss GM, asking the Ole Miss GM to stop all communication with Farrelly because he had already signed. He is a Clemson player now. Like, he's not in the portal anymore. Like, stop trying to contact him because that is tampering. That is the classic tampering without any sense of a doubt about that, okay? Thomas, the GM for Ole Miss, said that, hey, he didn't do that, but Pete Golding does what he does. So he's saying that Pete Golding himself was trying to contact the player and that he was doing what he was going to do, even if it wasn't necessarily within the letter of the law when it comes to tampering. So that was the end of that conversation. And then after that, there is communication that happened between Golding to Farrelly, pretty much saying like, hey, I like pretty much texting the player, pretty much saying, I know you're signed, but what's the buyout? Which is like a quote that Dabo said. Again, we don't know exactly because there is no real facts that have been presented or, real evidence that all this happened. But this is all based off what Dabo has said. I know you're signed. But what's the buyout? Which is what he's saying Golding said to the player, and was followed by a photo of a $1 million contract and phone calls from quarterback Trinidad Chambliss and former quarterback Jackson Dart trying to get Farrelly, the player, to go back into the portal and then go to Ole Miss. Again, Ole Miss, when he was in the portal, he was down to Ole Miss and Clemson as the two schools that he was gonna potentially transfer to from Cal. And then he ultimately played Clemson, and then it comes back, and then Ole Miss is trying to still kind of contact him. Golding doing all of that, and then on the 15th. It was a 4-hour roller coaster that it started that day where Farrelly was told the staff, all the coaches, that he was going to stay put and he was going to stay with Clemson, no issue at all. And then by the end of the day, by the late afternoon, he had went into the school's office pretty much saying he wanted to be entered into the portal, and then he was going to go to Ole Miss. And now Clemson's going to fight it, and they're going to try to do the same thing as what Washington did with their quarterback, and then also what Duke is trying to currently do with the quarterback that is trying to do the portal after trying to get out of his deal. So this is my thing, okay? When it comes to Clemson, again, this is happening everywhere. This is not a new thing, right? This is the one thing that everybody is scared of, because when it comes to tampering, all of this thing, if the players are going to have the freedom to do what they want to do, and there's not going to be any guardrails when it comes to once you sign a contract, you have to stay and all of that, situations like this are going to happen, okay? And this is where the Swinney part makes it even more of a big deal when it comes to the college football world. Swinney famously has been against the portal in every sense of the word. He was the last remaining pillar of being a guy that said, hey, I want to get a guy in as a high schooler and get them and grow them, and not only as a player, but as a person. And again, this is all his words. I'm not necessarily saying that I believe this, which again, I think I believe to a certain extent, because for so long he had stuck to that. And a lot of his players never really left Clemson, and he was doing what he was supposed to do. And as much as I have bad things to say about him, a lot of his players don't necessarily say such bad things about him. So I have to take it on face value for the most part that when the players get to Clemson, he lets you stay. He's going to try to build you up from the ground up. He's not going to quit on you. Even if you don't play, you can still stay in the program, get your degree and all of that. And he had stuck to that, right? And he had been famously against the portal, and people were yelling at him, talking about, hey, if you are Clemson and you still want to have the high bar that he had kind of set there of trying to go win not only the ACC, but having a chance to win national championships like he had done throughout the 2010s at Clemson, is that you have to change with the times. If you are going to do this, you have to be willing to make some changes when it comes to what your philosophy is if you're going to survive in the sport, right? And people have been wanting him to do that forever, and he's been so unwilling. And then finally this year, he jumps on the bandwagon. I think last year he got only two transfers to come in, right? Even with players leaving sometimes from his program, he had been very against even bringing players in from the portal at all. And then now this year, I think, let me get how many exactly, because it is a big deal, because as a guy that didn't want to do it at all, and then they've had their worst couple seasons they've had in a while under Dabo, and this past year, I think they won, I'm not sure how many games, but it's a lot less than what you think Clemson should, especially in the ACC. Let me get to, let's see, the ACC. Clemson, right? A guy that famously didn't want to do it at all. This year, they brought in 9 commits as transfers to come to Clemson, right? This is a lot more than anybody ever thought. And people were truly questioning whether that would actually happen, okay? But he did. He's brought in 9 transfers to come into the school. And he's done exactly what everybody thought he needed to do. Again, not necessarily at a high rate. He's getting a bunch of 3-star, 4-star guys, nothing crazy. But again, it shows a little bit of a change that he's willing to change with the times a little bit. Again, how much he's doing this willingly, I'm not sure. But again, he's doing it, right? But then for him to make this move, along with Finelli, the linebacker, brought him in, did exactly what he didn't want to do, and brought in this player. And then getting burned by this player and by another school, by him jumping into the portal, back into the portal right away and going to the other school he was potentially going to go to. I just think that this was one of those situations where if you were going to try to tamper with somebody's player, you should have picked anybody else's fucking program. Because here's my thing with Dabo, right? At his heart, he can be a real fucking Karen. In every sense of his life, he can be. He can be that guy. And especially when he doesn't want to deal with this at all. He never want to deal with this portal shit. And now that he's been forced to, either by the school or whether when it comes to now competitively he's been forced to, and then as soon as he does it, his player that he brings in, maybe not all the way willingly, gets him to come, and then he reneges and then goes to a different school. Of course he was going to fucking snitch. And he's going to be the first one to scream it to the high heavens. And here's the thing, and this is what makes it crazier, is because nobody else is going to really try to make that big of a deal of moments like this, because every other school is willingly being a part of the tampering part. I feel like to a certain extent, everybody's tampering. It sucks, but even my school, Ohio State, even as much as I believe they're trying not to, they're trying to do it by the letter of the law at all times. But to a certain extent, if you're not doing it, you're almost behind the 8 ball at all times, because every other school is tampering. But Clemson isn't doing it. Dabo isn't fucking doing it. So now that he's had to buy into the system a little bit and do what he had to do, bringing in these players, and then a player reneges, he was going to snitch to everybody. And when he goes into his press conference for an hour and he details all this, of course he was going to. And I just think if you're Pete Golding, if you're Ole Miss, like, what did you think he was going to do? Just fucking eat it and not say anything? And again, I'm not saying Dabo being the one that's snitching now about it is going to necessarily change the landscape, and now everybody's going to change the rules, and rule changes are going to come, and all these, and guardrails going to come like we're supposed to have. But this is another step. This is another step. And as much as I'm not a big fan of Dabo as a coach, he's well respected in the fucking industry. Maybe not as a competitive coach right now, because he's so against the change. Sorry to take a drink. That's been happening in the sport. But he's respected as a man, and he's respected as an all-time coach in college football. So I just think that this is one of those things that it's just another, again, the fact that I have to agree with him is an absolute travesty, but I have to agree with him in this scenario because it's happening everywhere. And if this is one of the few rules that has actually been outlined by the NCAA and by all of this shit, where it's pretty much the Wild West in pretty much everything else when it comes to NIL dollars, how much they're getting paid, what the actual salary cap is, and what players are supposed to, like, these deals are supposed to be real, they're not, like, all this other shit about the Wild West. But the one thing that has been inked down, pen to paper, is that tampering is not allowed if a player is not in the portal. And now it's happened to fucking Dabo Swinney's program, to a player that he didn't even want to do, like, he didn't want to be a part of this anyway. He was going to fucking snitch, and I'm not necessarily mad at him for doing so. Again, is it really going to change anything? Probably not, but it's just another step on the journey of maybe getting to that point at some point in this whole roller coaster that is college football right now, and where change is always happening, and we don't know when it's coming next, and like we just need a little bit. There needs to be some real changes, but it's just the fact that Dabo, in his first try of really trying to start embracing this system, and that's been burned by it, and he's now snitching. And it's kind of hard to refute when he had already, like, when the player already went to Clemson, like, had already starting to kind of buy in, and kind of like he's getting an apartment, getting a car, enrolling in classes, going to classes, and going to meetings and workouts. And then he ends up transferring again. Like, that seems real smoking gun-ish to me. I don't know. It's just, again, my head is spinning because of the idea that I have to agree with Dabo. But everything he was talking about in that scenario, I agree with. And again, this has been stuff I've been talking about forever. And this is one thing that really, because again, all the other shit is like, whatever it is, it's going to happen. But just the tampering part, if you can find a way to police it and to punish and for all this shit to happen, I feel like it's almost like a domino effect that the other parts of this sport that have kind of gone awry will start to be knocked over too, to where fixes really will really start to happen. But it's just it almost feels like there's so much going on, you only can fix one thing at a time. And the easiest thing to fucking fix is the thing that is like already signed on paper that you can't fucking do, and it's tamper. That's the one thing when it comes to the NIL money and all the salary cap shit. All of that stuff is wiggle room. There's wiggle room in all of it. But the tampering thing is the one thing that's pretty much ironclad you're not supposed to do, and it's happening everywhere. So if the NCAA and all these schools and these conferences can find a way to really lock in something to change this to where this isn't going to happen as much, or if it does, there's going to be some real punishments for these schools and for these coaches for doing this shit. And for the players too. Like, there should be some real punishments for this. And if you do that, I just think it'll make things a little bit easier little by little, because all the change is not going to happen at once. It's going to be happening. It's just like moving it's like the Titanic going towards the iceberg, right? It's like it's happening a little bit at a time, but you're eventually getting there. And again, I think that's getting towards disaster. So maybe that's the wrong thing to do, but it's like trying to move a big boulder, right? It's only going to happen a little bit at a time. Nobody's going to fucking kick that thing and send it 20 feet. Like, it's going to happen little by little. And by maybe getting to this part and fixing this, it can lead to making everything else a lot easier to fix too. I don't know. Again, it's Dabo, man. It just sucks that I have to agree with that, man. But I agree with him in this sense, like that needs to be fixed if we're going to get closer to the college football that we really want to, that we really can root for and not have as much like despair about when all this shit's happening all at once. All right, next thing that I wanted to talk about. NCAA approves jersey patches on uniforms starting next season. So this doesn't have to be a big story. Like, again, it's a big one because there's so many fans and teams and that have a lot of history and their uniforms looking a certain way. And there's a lot of people out there that believe that adding patches to uniforms is a bad thing and that it'll lead to it's dirtying up the sport and like having all this and that happen. And again, it's the money's here. It's in your face. It is what it is. It's not going to change. But if adding patches to uniforms that, it happens anyway, because patches are added when teams go to these bowl games and all of that. And if the schools can use that same real estate throughout the season to help their programs by infusing some money that won't have nearly the ties of accepting like Saudi money, like private equity money, like that comes with strings attached. But if you can just make a deal with a company in your area or within like a national company that wants to be a part of it and like have their brand on your team's jersey, that seems like a very one-for-one transaction that'll help with the money for these schools so they can help keep these programs running. And I love the Ohio State uniform. I love uniforms in general. Like, they all look very good, but I just don't think patches are going to be the end-all, be-all, and it'll ruin fucking college football in the way that it looks. I just don't think that's the case. And maybe it helps that I watch NBA and like they've been doing the patches for years now when it comes to adding different companies on their patches on their jerseys. So maybe I'm just a little bit more, what is it? What's the word I'm looking for? Adjusted to that potential outcome to happen. And again, the story's been out for a while. Ohio State's been looking for companies to do a patch like that so they can do that, try to infuse some money into the program. Because again, everybody's trying to get the money to pay these players and keep it's an arms race to stay competitive in college football right now. So anything you can do is a big deal. So I'm not against it. I kind of understand people that are like against it because they want the idea of purity and it not being about money and about young people playing football for their pride and for their family and for the university. I get all of that to a certain degree. But again, like I said earlier, it's just unrealistic to believe that is all that is happening right now. And the more we can kind of get past some of these hurdles that, people are so like holding on to for dear life, I just think people will adjust, man. Because at the end of the day, people are going to watch college football because that's a part of the fabric of these communities and of these cities and of these towns and of this country. It's a part of it. College football is, and it's like, again, if you make it happen, people aren't going to leave the sport. So I just think that just making it happen and just having an open mind to some of this stuff, I just feel like it seems like such a big deal. But as you go past and you like years go by, it's going to be like, hey, I really like complained about that at one point. I was so against it. Like, it doesn't even fucking matter to me now. So I'm just like, just have an open mind and just be willing to roll with the punches, because some of these changes are just definitely necessary and they were going to happen anyway. It just sucks that it feels like all the changes are happening at once for like a lot of the older fans that don't necessarily want to deal with all of these changes happening all at once. So that part I am a little bit sympathetic to, but outside of that, I'm just like, it's the changes coming to the sport. It is what it is. Again, we have no control over that. So that's all I got on that. And then the next story I have is the college football playoff will remain a 12-team playoff going into the 2026 season, because the conferences could not agree on a plan for more teams, either like the 16 or going up to 20 or whatever. I don't think we need to go that far. I don't think there's 20 teams that deserve a chance at a national title every single year. I've been on that for a while. I would have stopped at 8 to a certain degree, because I just don't think year after year there's 12, 18, 20 teams, 12, 16, 20, or 24 teams that really should have a chance at a national title every year. They're just not the case. But again, as the sport levels out, maybe that'll change, but I'm just not there as of yet. But they couldn't figure out a plan for it, so it's going to stay 12 for this upcoming season with 2 big changes. Well, again, that couldn't get figured out because the SEC and the Big Ten, the 2 major players in college football, are the conferences that just can't get along, and they really can't come to any type of conclusion. So as long as those 2 conferences are at odds, there's really no change that's going to happen if they're really trying to make it happen. So when it comes to the 12-team playoff for next year, there are going to be 2 major changes to the rules going into next year that didn't apply this past season. 1, the Power 4 champs will be guaranteed spots in the playoff, as well as the highest ranked champ from the group of 6. And then the second change is that Notre Dame will be guaranteed a spot as long as they are in the top 12 at the end of the season. So those are the 2 changes. Those are the 2 major changes that are going to happen. So with those 2 changes, if they applied to this past playoff that we just experienced, instead of Clemson being in the playoff, Notre Dame and Duke would be in the playoff instead. I think Clemson would be not Clemson. Miami would be out. They would never made the playoff if those rules apply to this past season. And if some other team would have been kicked out too, but really, what does it matter? But it was, so Notre Dame and Duke would be in the playoff rather than Miami getting in and those 2 teams not getting in. So how do I feel about this? So the one rule about the all Power 4 champs being guaranteed a spot, I just don't fucking agree. I get why the conferences would want that to be the case now because of what happened with the ACC and Duke. I get the idea that you want because again, if it happens like this again, it does take away a little bit of the impact of what the conference championship game means to each of these conferences. And again, it only happens that way if your conference is ass and all of your teams can't get it together and win the games they're supposed to win, which is what happened in the fucking ACC last year. If Miami had gotten their shit together throughout the year and not lost the couple big games that they had, like they weren't even big games, teams they were supposed to beat by a landslide, they would have been in their own ACC championship game and this stuff wouldn't be as big of an issue. But Miami didn't take care of business throughout the regular season. And then it brought up all this hubbub with them and Notre Dame because Notre Dame didn't have the guaranteed spot, so they got kicked out. And I just feel like I just don't think year after year, if a conference overall and these teams are going to be ass, they're not going to take there's no team that's going to separate themselves from the pack and really prove themselves to be good enough to be in the playoff. I don't feel like they should be automatically in if they win a bad conference. I just don't think so. Because I just think in general, this whole playoff thing started with trying to get the best teams in. And I get it. There's supposed to be a little bit of a what is the word I'm looking for? There's supposed to be a little bit of a balance between best team and most deserving. There has to be a balance of those two. I totally understand that. But I do feel like there are years where I just feel like there's years in specialty reasons that I think that should be a little bit of a sliding scale. And I feel like if you were going to introduce this new rule in when it comes to guaranteeing the conference championship winner to be in for the Power Four, I feel like you're taking away a little bit of that sliding scale portion of it. I do feel like there are going to be seasons when that's going to be applicable. I feel like it's just going to take away that, and I feel like we should just not be giving. It's kind of like the same thing as like the NFL, where the NFC South winner, the Panthers, this past year, they were under 500 and they were hosting a fucking playoff game. Like that's where and I was totally against that. The fact they got to host a playoff game, and again, their rules are more a little bit like their rules are more compact and like they're locked in. You win your conference, you're into the playoffs, and you get a home playoff game. But I don't necessarily agree with that. If all of your teams in your conference show that they're not worthy of being a good enough, producing a good enough team that deserves to have a home game, when there's a conference that has 3, 11, 12 game winners in their conference, and one of them has to be on the road now because of that. I just don't agree with that in general, because I feel like it just should be a sliding scale a little bit of wiggle room for these moments, because it's just like college football is not going to be even all the time. And as much as the rules themselves and NIL and the portal has evened out a lot of schools, there are going to be schools that are not good enough and they don't deserve an opportunity. And if the teams that are of that caliber don't take care of business in the regular season, that should not lead to like a team like Duke that had no reason to be in the playoff getting in. And that will be an option now because of these teams that win their conferences automatically being guaranteed a spot, and that just should not be the case. So I don't agree with it. Maybe my mind will change as the sport keeps changing with rosters and all of that, but as of right now, I just don't think I agree with that part. And then Notre Dame, I don't know. Do I agree with it? Probably not. But I also have to acknowledge the fact that Notre Dame has always gotten special treatment in college football. It's going to happen. Notre Dame is that school that's always going to get some special treatment in this scenario, and it's just another chapter in the saga of Notre Dame getting that opportunity they probably don't deserve, and they probably, again, just based off their name. I get it. They're Notre Dame, and the history speaks for itself, but it's just, I just don't agree with it. I don't agree with the fact that they should just be automatically given a spot. Again, if they're in the top 12, they should deserve to be in. Again, that's the rule. And if I really have to think about it, if they're in the top 12, they deserve to get in. And again, this all comes back to the fact that this is all kind of decided by 13 people in a room? I forget how many people are on the committee. But the fact that there are people in a committee that get to decide this thing, if they decide that Notre Dame's a top 12 team, they deserve to get into the playoff. That's fine. That's fine. Maybe I'm just being a little bit too jaded by the whole Notre Dame aspect of it. But it's just like one of those things that is just like, I just don't like the fact that Notre Dame always gets special treatment in these scenarios, but maybe this is one of those spots where maybe they deserve that special treatment. If they're in the top 12, they deserve to be in the playoff. Fine. If they're good enough to be in the top 12, they deserve to be in the playoff. I guess. Again, it's just, I just don't like giving in to Notre Dame fans, man. Notre Dame and their fans, I'm just not a big fan of them. As an Ohio State fan myself, again, I'm in rarefied air talking about other rarefied air fan bases. I get it. It sounds like me kind of like, the small violin and all of that shit. But I don't know. When it comes to Notre Dame, I'm just always going to be initially against making any type of concession toward Notre Dame at all, because they feel like they deserve the world, and it's not necessarily the case. I just don't think so. But I guess maybe in this spot, they probably have a point. They probably, if they're in the top 12 at the end of the year, they deserve to be in the playoff. But again, I just feel like if they were to join a conference, they wouldn't have to deal with this shit. But they get to have their cake and eat it too, and that's where my anger comes from, because they don't want to have to acquiesce and be a part of the rest of the college football world, but they still want to be a part of the big dance that everybody else is a part of. So you don't have to follow any of the rules that everybody else has to follow, but you want to have a special case for yourself to get in as long as you That's the part I hate is the fact they want to have their cake and eat it too. That's it. I think I've diagnosed my own issue with Notre Dame is that they always want to do it their own way and still get their way, and it's just not the case. If they just join the Big Ten or actually join the ACC, they wouldn't have to deal with this shit. But they want to get all their money and not have to join conferences and not have to play a conference championship game like everybody else does if you're a team of that caliber, but yet they still want to get in the playoff. That's what gets me. That's what irks me about this. I hate it, but it is what it is. And then the last college football topic that I have is, okay, so Curt Cignetti, one of his biggest, what's the word I'm looking for? Quotes that he has had ever since he kind of bursted onto the scene at Indiana was when he was, I think it was like a first interview of like a very like a very popular interview that he had early on at Indiana was that, hey, I win, Google me. I think that was in his press conference, his opening presser was that, hey, I win, Google me. And people would always make fun of him up until this year where they won the national title. They did what they were supposed to do. Again, I don't have to give them any more credit. I think I've done enough when it comes to talking about how great Indiana has been this year and how magical their season kind of turned out to be. But so now, because of that, Google has done one of the funniest things I've ever seen. And now when you Google Curt Cignetti's name, it automatically on the top of the page will say, yep, he won. And I do think that's a funny thing. Again, it's like one of the more memeable things that he is, not memeable, but like impactful things he has said throughout his time in Indiana. Now he's done a lot bigger things and won a national title and all of that. But the fact that you now can search his name and it'll say, yup, he won right there at the top of the page is kind of awesome. It's very funny. So I did have to mention that for anybody that wants to go try it. You can go try it right now. And that's exactly what it did. I made sure I did it before I started the pod here. And it literally says, yup, he won at the top of the page. So I do have to give Google a lot of credit there. That the fact that they saw that as an opportunity to make this change, and it's really cool. And it's just like kind of like a full circle thing. Like, hey, he said at the beginning of his time in Indiana, yep, I win, Google me. And now when you Google him, it'll say, yep, he won. That's actually really cool. So that's something I wanted to mention on the pod as well. But again, not necessarily a big story. I think it was just kind of a funny one to kind of add in. All right. Now I'm done with college football. Let's go ahead and jump into the NFL now, where I have like 2 stories to kind of talk about. They're both coach kind of connection. Nope. They're coaching stories when it comes to head coaching in the NFL and just coaches in general getting hired and fired when it comes to this hiring cycle in the NFL right now. So I have two of those to talk about, and then I'll get to the conference championship stuff. So here's what I got. Another head coaching job has been filled with the Ravens hiring ex-Chargers DC Jesse Minter. Jesse Minter, who is a guy that has spent some time with the Ravens, I believe. I think he was their DC for a little bit. Let me make sure I'm not crazy. Nope, that's not the story I wanted to click on. Let's see here. In the NFL, home. Minter. So Minter, who was most recently the DC for the Los Angeles Chargers over the last couple of years with Harbaugh. Before that, he was at Michigan with Harbaugh as the DC there. And then, he's been with Jim Harbaugh the last 4 seasons. So he was at the University of Michigan for 2022 and 2023. And then he was with the Chargers for the last 2 years with Harbaugh for 2024 and 2025. And his first NFL job came with John Harbaugh, Jim Harbaugh's brother, where he was a defensive assistant from 2017 to 2020. So for his old coaching career, he had been with a Harbaugh to a certain extent, with his longest tenure being with Jim, both at Michigan and at the Chargers the last 4 years or so. So now he is going to be the head coach for the Baltimore Ravens, which was pretty much looked at to be the top job in this year's coaching cycle for all the NFL jobs that have been opened, right? Which I kind of agree with. Like, maybe you can have some type of, like, maybe you value Buffalo's a little bit more, but I think I'd probably value the Ravens because they do have Lamar. They do have a long track record of having having a great GM, having a great owner, and like having a long-term history of just like excellence, right? So I would probably go Baltimore over, and Baltimore 1, and then probably go Buffalo 2, because especially with the owner going off and saying the stupid shit he said during the press conference earlier this week, which I think we've already talked about. Actually, no, did we talk about it? No, I guess we didn't. So he said like the owner for the Buffalo Bills, and they were doing the press conference with the GM now turned, I think he's like the head of football operations now, and Brandon Beane, and they were talking about Keon Coleman, and then the owner kind of came in as Brandon Beane was answering the question, pretty much saying that Keon Coleman was a coaching staff pick when he was drafted to the Buffalo Bills out of Florida State a few years ago, that it was a coaching staff pick and not Brandon Beane's idea, and that's not the guy he actually wanted when they drafted him. He decided to acquiesce to the coaching staff, which one was a terrible idea because, Keon Coleman's still on your goddamn team. Unless you plan on releasing him tomorrow, that's still a guy you're paying him to come and play for you. And not to mention the fact that, I get it, you're trying to throw the head coach under the bus, the guy that you already fired, you're now trying to replace. But the OC for the Bills was also there at that point, and he's also a candidate for the job of being the head coach of Buffalo. So you're throwing not only the guy you already threw under the bus, you're throwing him under the bus again, but now a guy that could still be attached to your team, you might be throwing him under the bus as well as Keon Coleman, the guy that he's still on your team. You drafted him. I don't think they're going to just sit here and just let him go and like let him off the hook and like let him go to a different team. So I think you still have to deal with him on an everyday basis, and you threw him under the bus. And I just think to a certain degree, I get it, Keon Coleman hasn't been nearly what they thought he was going to be when they drafted him, but I do think that's something you have to keep in-house, and you just don't come out with it with all willy-nilly without thinking about the consequences of that. And that's that situation, especially to protect the guy, the GM that helped with the pick. And then especially after the owner came out and tried to say that, people were going back because literally perfect timing, like during that time when they were drafting Keon Coleman, they were doing Hard Knocks. And that there were plenty of clips of Brandon Beane talking about how much he wanted Keon Coleman himself. And this wasn't with the head coach around. There was plenty of times, there were clips that were coming out for days after that whole press conference talking about how Brandon Beane was talking about how he wanted Keon Coleman and that he was excited to draft him. Like, he was doing that without the coach around. He wasn't saying this is the coach's guy. Like, he was saying he wanted Keon Coleman as well. So now there's obvious evidence that is contrary to what the owner was trying to say. So I do think that does add to the fact that maybe it's a little bit of like a weird situation ownership wise and all of that there. On top of the fact they kept the GM that obviously was a part of the problem as to why the team wasn't good enough. Again, they were good enough for Josh Allen to lead them all the way to the divisional round again. But I think that everybody knows watching football that it's not like the Bills were the most talented team out there. Again, we talked about this on the last pod, how Brandon Beane wasn't necessarily doing his job of filling out the roster in the same way that maybe some of the rest of the big quarterbacks teams were doing so throughout the last few years, with their quarterbacks doing what they're supposed to do, trying to fill out the roster with other talented players. So, but yeah, back to the part where Baltimore is the best job, and now they have filled it with Jesse Minter. What do I think about that? I was kind of surprised they went with a defensive head coach again. I thought they were going to lean towards offense because you had Lamar, and because there was obviously a power struggle a little bit between Lamar, like maybe not a power struggle, but you could tell that Lamar and John Harbaugh were not on the same page at all times, and that they weren't on the best of terms. And you kind of so I thought when you got rid of Harbaugh that this was opening up an opportunity for the Ravens to get an offensive-minded head coach that can call the plays, and that you wouldn't have to worry about getting a new coordinator every time that now you'd have to every time that, because again, same issue I've been talking about if you have a good offensive coordinator, they're more likely going to get a head coaching job at some point. So you're going to have to replace them a lot more often than you are a defensive coordinator, because it's just kind of how the league is going as of right now. So I really did think they were going to go offensive head coach when it comes to how they were going to hire somebody. And not to mention, I thought that they went with a young guy that comes a little bit more risk. Like Jesse Minter has been doing a great job as the DC with the Chargers these past 2 years, and when he was doing Michigan was pretty good too. But again, he was kind of, getting the cheating and all of that. I'm not going to go too far into that fact. But he's been doing a good job as the DC with the Chargers over the last couple of years. So I'm not saying that he's guaranteed he won't work, but there's no guarantee that he will. And I think that when you have a quarterback in his prime that has 3 to 4 more years of prime football left in him, I thought you would go with a little bit more of an established head coach that you would have a little bit of a higher floor attached to. So maybe you can kind of guarantee at least getting to a certain point to where you're not going to have so there'd be no risk of totally ruining it coach head coaching wise, to where maybe you hire a bad. Again, I'm not saying Jesse Minter will be a bad hire. I don't necessarily hate it, but I think it does come with a considerable amount of risk. But I thought that you wouldn't want to take when you've sided with your prime quarterback in his prime. I just thought you're going to go with an offensive minded guy. So now, on top of hiring him, I think he'll do good with the defense. I'm not going to lie to you, because it wasn't like the Chargers defense was the most talented defense out there, and he was making them play. They were playing hard for him, and they were playing physical, playing hard, and they were getting the job done. Again, it's not like they were the most talented defense out there. So I do think he'll be able to work wonders with the defense, but it just now you have to go and hire an OC for Lamar, and then maybe that OC will stay for a year or two and then go on and have to take another job, and then you're going to be back into finding another OC again. And I just feel like you didn't. They could have had a chance to not have to go through that again if they would have picked an offensive-minded guy, but apparently they fell in love with Jesse Minter. Hopefully it'll work out, because again, they just have to make it work, because once Lamar's out of his prime, what are you going to do after that? Lamar has 3 to 4 more years of prime football where you can expect him to be at his best, and then it'll be a landslide from there. So you really have to take advantage of these next 3 to 4 years of his prime. And I'm just you are taking a risk with maybe Jesse Minter isn't a head coach. Maybe that's the case. We've seen it before, so I just don't want to. I'm not saying he'll be a bad pick. I'm just saying there is a chance. It is on the board that he may not be a great head coach, and you'll now be back at the table again in a couple years once you decide that he's not doing the job correctly. So, especially when you already fired a guy that had already gotten you that was again, I'm not saying he had the highest ceiling in John Harbaugh, but he had a very high floor, and you weren't going to be terrible with him as your head coach. So now you're taking a risk to potentially be worse than that. So that's why I thought they would go with a little bit more of a guaranteed option, maybe an offensive guy to help out with Lamar and make sure that connection was good. But it's just they're taking a chance on another home run for the next 15 years. I think that's what they're going for. I hope it works out. But you have Lamar there, and I thought they would go with more of a Lamar type of guy. And I'm not sure Jesse Minter is necessarily Lamar's first pick as a head coach. But again, the owner, Bieniemy, is it Bieniemy? Nope, that's not his name. Ravens owner Bisciotti. Sorry. Steve Bisciotti, he said from the get-go in his presser that he has all the power. He was taking Lamar's input, but he had all the power, and he exercised that power by hiring Minter to be the next head coach. Hopefully it works. Actually, I hope it doesn't work. I'm a Steelers fan. That's kind of weird. I'm not wishing for their downfall, but I am. It's kind of a weird one, but I don't know. I'm not going to go any farther into that. Next one, Cowboys hire Christian Parker as the DC, who is the former secondaries coach for the Eagles, okay? I have a couple problems with this, okay? A couple problems. One, this now DC has never called defensive plays before. I'm not saying that's an instant no, but I'm saying that is something you're going to have to get over, and you're going to have to hope that he's going to be good as a DC kind of doing the play calling thing, because that is an art within itself. Coaching a player to be as good as they're supposed to be is an art in itself that you do have to be good at as a DC, but especially as a defense coordinator or offense, anybody that has to call plays, calling plays is a skill you have to master. And I do think that is something they're taking a risk on because the dude has never called plays before. So who knows whether he's actually good at that. Again, I'm not saying, but when it comes to the coaching part, a lot of the Eagles secondary players like Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell came out and said that they would really, they're sad to see him go, and that I think Cooper DeJean talked about saying, I think he tweeted that like he wouldn't be the player he is without Christian Parker as a coach for them. So like I'm not saying he can't be a developer. He looks like he is a decent developer. So the not calling plays before is one thing I have a problem with this. And then the second problem I have is that when he was at his most successful, his stint with the Eagles, he was getting some very talented players to coach up. So, and the Cowboys are not as good as drafters as the Eagles are. The Eagles, I have talked about their GM being one of the best GMs in the NFL, and that he's a really good developer, like really good at has a really good eye for talent, and that the Eagles are literally killing the draft every single year, not only when it comes to picking the right guys, but also maneuvering the draft and getting guys to at deals and like getting guys that are like maybe that have high ceilings and that they're very talented. Like that's something the Eagles are very good at. I don't think the Cowboys are as good at doing that. So once this guy is a DC for the Cowboys, how are you so sure he's going to be able to do more with less? Because I'll never believe that the Cowboys will ever have the talent on their defense overall that the Eagles have had over the last 5-10 years, like where they've always had talented dudes on their defense, especially as of recent when this guy Christian Parker has been there. So that's my other question is, can he do more with less? Because I never think the Cowboys are going to be able to draft in the same way the Eagles are and be able to get him as talented players as the Eagles have on the defense. So that's like, those are my two big questions with that. Because I'm like, again, I'm never sitting here saying the Cowboys need to be very competitive and all. I think the NFL is a funnier place when the Cowboys do this shit every year, where they make their own fans think they can have a chance to go win some important games, and they fall flat on their face every year. I think the NFL is a funnier place when that happens. So I'm not sitting here rooting for the success of the Cowboys by any means, but I do think that in general, when it comes to this hire, that it just doesn't necessarily make the most sense to me. I thought they would try to go for a more like, veteran DC that's called plays before, that's done it in the NFL, and they're kind of taking a little bit of a swing here. And that's where I think, again, but because their coach is an offensive guy. So that's where I think it's even more important for you to have a guy that's done it before. And like, especially with your coach being an offensive guy, calling plays on that side. I don't know if it's a little bit of a risk on the Cowboys side. So those are both of the coaching things I wanted to talk about. So now, let's see. They're open NFL jobs. So as of now, the jobs that are left is going to be Buffalo, it's going to be Pittsburgh, it's going to be the Cardinals, it's going to be the Cowboys, which again, the Cowboys, insane, the fact that they have lasted as long, like, sorry, no, the Browns, sorry, I said the Cleveland Browns, right? Yeah, insane, the fact that nobody seems like they wants to take the Cleveland Browns job at all. There's been multiple guys that are like in it for other jobs that the Browns have asked to like take interviews with them, and they keep telling them no. It's insane the fact that like it's so obvious the Browns job is like radioactive that nobody really wants to take it, even though we all know that somebody is going to take that job because there's really no other opportunities and they're going to have to take that chance. But it's just funny to see that they keep trying to get some of these higher, like these more applauded names, the hotter names, and like they all keep telling them no, which is kind of funny. I wanted to talk about this. So the Chargers, speaking of guys leaving, I already talked about the guy that was leaving that team to go be a head coach, but now they're OC. So Mike McDaniel, this news happened as we were podcasting last time, so we didn't really get to talk about this on pod. But the news came out that he had signed a deal. Mike McDaniel, who is the former head coach of the Dolphins, had signed a deal to be the OC for the Chargers as long as he doesn't get like head coaching consideration. Because if he does, he'd automatically be able to go take that job. But as long as he doesn't get a head coaching spot that he wants to actually take, also another guy that was offered a chance to go interview for the Browns head coaching position, he told them no as well. Hilarious. Funny. I love laughing at the Browns and how dumb they are as a team and how bad they are as an organization. So Mike McDaniel, I think it's a very good spot for him if he ends up going there as the OC for the Chargers. Let me get to my one negative first, then I'll get to all the positives. I think him and Harbaugh are the most different individuals you can possibly have as people. Harbaugh is a very to the point football guy that really has no other interest except football and physicality and doing all that, right? And Mike McDaniel is more of like I'm right? It's Mike McDaniel. Let me make sure I got his name right because they keep saying it. Mike McDaniel, okay. Mike McDaniel is a guy that is kind of like a nerd, doesn't really have the gravitas of a football guy, but he's very smart. He knows how to put together an offense, and it's just when he talks in very long-winded sentences. So like every answer he has is very like long and like drawn out. So it just feels like when it comes to the type of people that they are, they're very different. And I would love to be able to fly on the wall to have to experience a conversation between Harbaugh and McDaniel talking about offense, and I just feel like that'd be hilarious to have to experience. But let me get to all the positives about him potentially being the OC for the Chargers, again, as long as he doesn't get a head coaching job that he actually wants. So I think him going to be the OC for the Chargers, he gets to be the OC for a Justin Herbert, who is a very talented quarterback that can do anything that McDaniel would want to do when it comes to the quarterback position. He'd be able to throw as far as McDaniel would like him to. He'll be able to run if McDaniel wants to do some quarterback running option, like to have that have the QB option as a play for them. Again, they're not going to want to run Herbo all the time, but I do think he's going to have that option because Herbo is such a talented guy, not only throwing the football but running as well. And then on top of the fact that I just think McDaniel, the way that he has his offense, he likes to run the football. One of the things he does best is being able to make a creative and explosive running game. And I do think Harbaugh, in his blood, he loved Mr. Jim Harbaugh himself, loves to run the football. And I do think Mike McDaniel, in general, he was given a little bit of a soft. Everybody would talk about the fact that he's soft because he's a small guy, not really a big football when it comes to football big. And he kind of comes off as being a little bit soft, and the Dolphins were soft because they weren't necessarily a tough football team in the way that they played. But McDaniel, he has a very physical run game and creative but physical run game that I do think will mesh well with what Harbaugh wants to do. And then when you're going to get defenses to want to put extra guys in the box to try to stop the run game, he then can create big plays in the passing game. Again, you're going to have to get some faster receivers that can consistently catch the football. But as long as you get that, he'll be able to get you some big play action plays over the top and get you some big passing plays that Herbo would be able to take advantage of. So I do think that when it comes to what he likes to do offensively will really fit with what Harbaugh likes to do running the football. But when that doesn't work, or when you're going to lull defenses to sleep trying to stop the run, and then you're going to be able to, as long as you get a real wide receiver that you can rely on every down basis other than Ladd McConkey, if you can get a wide receiver that can really take the top off a defense on top of that, I really do think the Chargers will be a real problem for the rest of the NFL. Especially for those teams in the AFC West that they're going to have to deal with 2 times a year. He's going to be able to really put together some real offenses, though the defenses for those teams are going to have to worry about, but for the rest of the AFC as well. So I do think it's a very good fit, and they have running backs that they can rely on. They just drafted a first round running back this past year, and then they're going to get their offensive line, or they're going to get some guys back for their offensive line, getting them healthy. They're both their tackles, and they're probably going to have to draft another lineman to help out that line. But when healthy, that offensive line will actually be very good, and I do think they'll be able to do some of those things that he likes to do, running the football, and then if they get that thing humming again offensively and help out Herbert to where he doesn't have to be the whole offense, because that's really what it turned into throughout the rest of the year. Again, the offensive line was terrible, so that also was made it such a much bigger issue with Herbert having to run that offense. But get the offense fixed, and then you're going to add the creativity of Mike McDaniel. I do think it's going to lead to a very explosive offense for the rest of the NFL to have to deal with. And I do think that's going to be a big match in heaven, like a amazing match, other than the fact that when Harbaugh and McDaniel have to talk to each other. I think that will be absolutely hilarious, and not much will happen because I just think those two are so different as people. But I think otherwise, I think it'll be a very good match for everybody involved, as long as, Mike McDaniel doesn't take a head coaching job somewhere. And then also for McDaniel, I think for him, that's a very good spot. The fact that he gets to go with the Chargers, who doesn't necessarily get the most press coverage when it comes to, like, the Chargers are almost forgotten because they're not the biggest team in LA and all of that. He gets to live by the beach. And then if everything goes well and he does what he's supposed to do over the next year or so, he might be back to being a hot head coaching candidate for another team once the next hiring cycle comes through after next year. So I do think it's a very good spot for him if he's not going to take a head coaching job this time around, for him to set himself up to have an explosive offense next year and then be ready to go to maybe be the top guy the next go around when there's teams that are looking for a head coach. I do think it's a very good spot for him as well. So I decided to talk about it because I just think it's a match made in heaven, honestly, for Mike McDaniel and for the Chargers and for Herbert. Now then you get to drafting, try to get some more pass catchers that can be a little bit faster, and then maybe get that offensive line healthy, maybe add a couple more guys to that line. I do think they can really do some things next year with McDaniel as the OC. So that's all I got on that. And without further ado, I don't think I have any other stories to talk about in the NFL. Let me see here just to make sure. I don't have anything else. So let's go ahead and get to the games now. So we have two games to talk about. Not a lot. Again, it's the final four teams that are left in the NFL this season. So playing in the conference championship games on Sunday. Both games are happening on Sunday, right? Yeah, make sure I'm not crazy here. Yeah. So the first game will be the Broncos and Patriots game happening this Sunday at 3 p.m. In Denver. So that'll be a home game for Denver. And then the second game will be at 6:30 on Sunday, with Seattle being at home, with the Rams coming back in for those two teams facing off for a third time this season, with them being conference division foes and all of that. So that's going to be another big game. So those are the two games we have to talk about. I'm going to give my preview of those games and then give my picks. I do have Jason's picks for both of those games as well, so we're not going to miss out on that. But let's go ahead and get to those games. When it comes to the record so far in the postseason, I overall am 7-3, and then Jace overall through the first two rounds is 7-3 as well. So we're all tied up so far when it comes to the records. For the wild card round, I was 5-1, Jace was 3-3, and then for the divisional round, I went 2-2, and Jace went 4-0. Again, I just couldn't help myself. I picked Buffalo and Houston as the two differences with Jace, and I took an L on both. I should have gotten the win with Buffalo though. But, Josh Allen had to, have a terrible game that he hasn't really played before in the playoffs. So that kind of ruined it for me there. And then, obviously, Houston. CJ had a terrible day as well. So, but the defense was great, though. But, again, I don't have as much of a gripe on that one because that one was just, CJ had a all-time terrible day that day against New England. So it is what it is. So let's get to the games here. Broncos-Patriots. This is in Denver. Denver is going to be playing with Jared Stidham as their starting quarterback for this game, because we talked about in the last pod, we had Bo Nix in the last game against Buffalo, had injured broke his ankle and has to get he broke it during the last drive of the game in overtime. So he broke it. He'll be getting some surgery. He'll be back for next season, but he is gone for the rest of this postseason. So they're going to be without Bo Nix in this game, playing with Jarrett Stidham as their quarterback, a guy that hasn't taken any snaps in a NFL football game for the past 2 years. But when Sean Payton came out after the game and talked about the Bo Nix thing, he showed that he had confidence in Jarrett Stidham, that he said that he'll be ready to go, and that, again, there's not much else he can say. What he's supposed to say? Jarrett Stidham sucks ass. So why in the hell would you have him as your backup? So he does have to give him a little bit of a sense of confidence when it comes to talking to the media about him. Because, again, you're still relying on him to try to win the game if that's what your goal is for this game, which I think it is, being the conference championship and all that, with a chance to go to the Super Bowl. And then you have that going for the Broncos. You're going to be at home. Your defense is one of the best in the AFC. They've been doing their thing, but again, they do let up a lot of points against some of the better teams they have faced throughout this year. So that's going to be an issue. And then can you rely on Jarrett Stidham to get you some points when you have him? And it's just like, that is not something you can necessarily guarantee that'll happen. So that is going to be a big deal offensively. Can they kind of keep the ball rolling the same way they had with Bo Nix? Which I'm like, it's not totally guaranteed that Jarrett Stidham will be awful. Because I think to a certain degree, I'm not a big believer in Bo Nix in general. So for me, believing that Bo Nix isn't that great of a quarterback, if Sean Payton can make Bo Nix a viable starting quarterback in the NFL, why couldn't he do that with Jarrett Stidham? Again, maybe Bo Nix is a little bit better than just a viable quarterback. I think he's about average as a quarterback. So why can't Jarrett Stidham do that? Why can't Sean Payton do that with Jarrett Stidham? So that is an option on the board that maybe even with the lack of reps that he has had, that he can come into this game and they can manage to have him run the offense and do good things, even with us not seeing a lot of it in real football over the last 2 years from him. So that is an option on the board. I don't think it's a very likely option. Do I think it's more likely that he sucks ass or that he is awesome and wins the game? I think it's probably closer to him sucking ass. I'm not going to sit here and say he's going to come out and be amazing, but I do think it's probably closer in the middle, where I think he'll be able to manage the game, and Sean Payton will do some things offensively that'll try to help him as much as he possibly can. Again, this kind of in the same way with Bo Nix, because Bo Nix has not been consistently great all year long. Bo Nix has had times where he has been under, not playing as well as he probably can be, and they've managed to win football games even with that being the case, with their defense and with Sean Payton kind of dialing some things up to where makes it easier on Bo Nix. So he can maybe do that with Jarrett Stidham. So that's still an option in this game. I'm not going to put any money on that, but I think it is on the board that they can probably manage with Jarrett Stidham. On the Patriots side of this thing, so you have Drake May coming into this game. I don't think he's played a great game this postseason yet. But this is him coming off of a regular season where he is going to be in top 2 in the MVP voting, if not win it altogether. It's pretty much between him and Matthew Stafford. We'll see how that goes. I'd probably lean towards Matthew Stafford if I had a vote, but again, I don't have a vote. I don't fucking matter in this whole thing. I'm just sitting here talking on a microphone to a wall and to whoever decides to listen. So I'm not saying my opinion really matters, but I would probably give to Stafford if I had a choice. But Drake May has been playing good all year when it comes to regular season, but in the playoffs, he's played against 2 very good defenses in the Chargers and the Texans, and not necessarily. Again, he made some big throws last week against the Texans defense that without them, they probably don't win that game, even with all the turnovers by CJ. But he made some big plays, but otherwise, he has kind of been fumbling the football a lot. I think he has 5 fumbles throughout the last 2 games, so definitely a big one. And it does kind of come to ham size where, hey, he has smaller hands than other quarterbacks. And when guys come up and start swiping at the ball, having bigger hands would definitely be a help in that scenario. But guess what? Drake May was born with the hands that he has. And again, he's been managing all year without bigger hands. But in these last 2 playoff games, it has been a little bit of an issue for him holding on to the football. So that you have that. And then the rest of the offense for the Patriots, you have the offensive line who has not been looking all that great, especially the left side. Why am I forgetting the left tackle's name? Hold on. Let me get his name because I'm going to talk shit about him. I may as well say his name correctly and have his name in there. It is the Will Campbell, their first-round pick from this past season's rookie left tackle. He has been having trouble all year long with more talented pass rushers that are bigger than him and that have longer arms than him. Because, again, Will Campbell, as talented as a tackle that he is, he's not the biggest tackle out there. And one of his biggest weaknesses is the fact that he has shorter arms for a guy of his size. They list him at 6'6", 320, which, again, listed stuff isn't always the best way to, because, again, they lie all the time when it comes to listing sizes and weights and all of that. But the one thing that is very much proven about him is that he has short arms. And now that he has faced some of the better defensive ends in the NFL that are as big as him and as strong as him and that have longer arms, he has been having a lot of trouble with those type of defensive ends. And guess what the Broncos have? They have two very good, I'm not saying they're all-time defensive ends like some of the ones they've faced over the last couple weeks, but they are two very good defensive ends that are bigger and that have longer arms, that have those same type of characteristics. And if he keeps struggling, there's going to be more defensive ends in the lap of Drake May that may be able to get after him and sack him, which he has been sacked a lot in these playoffs. But also, maybe be able to create some turnovers if they can swipe at the ball and Drake May keeps fumbling the football like he has the last couple of games. So, like, the offensive line, especially the left side of the offensive line, will be an issue that they will have to handle against the Denver Broncos, who has a very good defense. Their defense is not as good as the Houston defense, but I think they're just as good as the Chargers defense. So I do think the Broncos defense will be able to get a lot of pressure on Drake May, especially from the left side of the line where, Will Campbell has been doing a lot of struggling so far, especially in the playoffs, heck, all year when it comes to some of the more talented pass rushers they're going to have to face. So I do think that'll be an issue for the New England offense to have to deal with. And then also, when it comes to their wide receivers, they have a talented set of wide receivers, not necessarily like, obviously Stephon Diggs is like a number one type of guy, and he's been playing very well throughout this season. I'm not really worried about him. But they have Kayshon Boutte, and then you have DeMario Douglas and Kyle Williams. But it's just kind of like a mix of those other guys alongside of Stephon Diggs, where it's not necessarily the most consistent wide receiver production. I think it's mostly based off of Drake May being able to have broken plays and be able to kind of throw the football down the field, and whoever is down there is down there. So it's not the most consistent of wide receiver production. It's more just Drake May kind of having some broken, other than Stephon Diggs, of course. It's Drake May having some broken plays and kind of making some things happen, along with Hunter Henry, their tight end, who's very good, along with Austin Hooper. But it's their pass catchers that I think, and they're going up against a very good Denver secondary. Is their secondary as good as, I think their number one is as good, the number one corner they have is as good as Houston's number one corner in Patrick Surtain for the Broncos, and then you have Derek Stingley Jr. as the number one for the Houston Texans. I think those guys are pretty comparable, but as a total secondary, are they as good as Houston? Maybe. It's close. I would say it's close. As a secondary, I think it's close. I think it's more of the pass rush that I think Houston kind of takes the cake when it comes to how good of a defense that they have. But I think secondary-wise, I think they're relatively close, and I do think they'll be able to, as long as they get after Drake May and don't let him have a lot of plays outside the pocket, extending plays and all of that with his legs, I do think their secondary will be able to do a decent job against the wide receivers from New England. So, and then the offense, and then for the defense for New England, they don't have an amazing pass rush. They've been looking at the last couple weeks. They've played against C.J. Stroud last week, who had the worst game he possibly could have. But again, his offensive line was a turnstile, and they really weren't doing any blocking for him whatsoever. And then the week before that against the Chargers, their offensive line was awful, and Justin Herbert really didn't have a lot of time to throw the football at all, especially in the second half. First half, it was a little bit. He had a lot more time, but his wide receivers weren't getting as much separation. But they have faced two defenses so far that their offensive line was definitely a weakness. But now, not being a great pass rush, they're going against an offensive line in the Denver Broncos that is probably one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, especially probably one of the best offensive lines that's left in the playoffs so far. So I do think the New England defense is going to have a lot of trouble. Defensive line is going to have a lot of trouble getting pressure on Jared Stidham just by getting after him with the pass rush. So I think it's going to be more about playing coverage against those wide receivers from Denver and hope that the coverage will lead to coverage sacks rather than the defensive line getting instant pressure on Jared Stidham and getting after him right away, because I just don't think that's going to happen against how good of a offensive line Denver has. And I just don't think New England has a defensive line that can create the instant pressure that you need, especially against a very good offensive line that Denver has. I just don't think it's really going to happen. So, and then the secondary for New England, they have a good secondary. I think Christian Gonzalez is their best guy. He's their number one corner, but I think outside of him, they play hard, but I don't think they have a talented secondary outside of Christian Gonzalez that you can just guarantee will be able to lock down anybody that the Broncos have. And when it comes to the Broncos, they have their hold on, let me see here. The Broncos, I'm forgetting names. Again, this is one of those things I do on this podcast where I always forget names. Obviously, they have a very talented wide receiver in Cortland Sutton. Marvin Mims is a very good backup wide receiver who can make some big plays. Troy Franklin, Pat Bryant, they're two very young wide receivers that they kind of take turns kind of having big games, and Pat Bryant is back for this game after not playing last week. Troy Franklin is questionable, but they have some talented wide receivers to deal with, and if Cortland Sutton is probably going to be taken away by Christian Gonzalez, I think that'll be his number one job, is to try to take Cortland Sutton away. Then it's going to be on the other young wide receivers to try to make plays against the secondary for the Patriots that isn't necessarily locked down or crazy talented on the backside of that defense. So, and if Jared Stidham can get some time to sit there in the pocket, read the defense, and throw the football where it needs to go to the open man, I do think they have some talented wide receivers that can make some bigger plays down the field. But it's just, is Stidham going to have enough time? And if he does have that time, is he going to be able to make the plays necessary to kind of keep the offense moving and be able to score some points? Because again, I think the defense will be able to put up a really good fight against that New England offense, but it's just, can he keep the offense moving and score the points necessary to back up that defense and how good they will play? Because again, I just don't think you're going to lock down. I think Drake May has not played a great postseason game so far this postseason, but it's just, he's capable of the big play at all times, even if it comes at the price of him maybe taking a big hit and running outside the pocket and doing all that. He'll do all of that. So he's always looking for the big plays. It's can you withstand those big plays, and can Stidham just keep your offense moving to be able to score points? Because there's no way. I just don't think there's going to be a way you're going to lock down the Patriots to under 10. But the question is can Denver's defense keep New England under 20? And can the offense led by Jared Stidham and Sean Payton get to where that 17 to 20 points and just keep make it be a little bit more of a low scoring game, while also understanding that you're not going to hold down Drake May for the whole game. He's going to get a couple on you. That's just how it's going to go, because he's been a big play machine all year. So it's a big deal. So Jace has picked New England for this game. The way I look at it is that I think New England is a 4.5 point favorite in this game, especially being at home. Obviously, with the fact they have a young starting quarterback that hasn't taken any snaps in 2 years. He's not young, but in Jared Stidham, I am going to pick New England as well in this game. If I was betting the line with it being 4.5 points, I'd probably go with Broncos. I do think they can probably keep the game close, but fortunately, we're doing it straight up, so it's going to be a little bit more black or white. So you have to pick a winner here. So Jay's picked New England, and so am I. I just think that New England has more avenues to win this football game than the Broncos do. And because of that, and because of all the things I've talked about, I just think, especially with Stidham, there's going to be so much volatility. And unless if I knew exactly what Stidham was going to give you, then I think I would be a little bit more comfortable maybe picking the Broncos to win this game. But it's just because I'm not sure what Stidham's going to be, and I just know what I'm getting from New England a lot more. So I just feel a lot more confident in picking New England to win that game, especially since Stidham's first start in 2 years. So with all that being the case, I'm going to take New England to win that game. I think it'll be close, though. I think it'll be a knockdown, drag-out fight till the end. I really do. I just think that I just think that you're not going to, unless you're going to guarantee me Drake May has an awesome game for the first time in his playoff career so far, with his first 2 games being before. I just don't think you can guarantee that. So I just think that Broncos can keep it close, but I do think New England probably wins the game to finish it out. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Broncos won this game. But again, I just think Broncos only have one way to win the game, and it's by causing turnovers, by keeping the score low. I just don't think the Broncos are going to win a shootout with the Patriots. So I just think the Broncos need to keep it as a lower scoring game, and hopefully that defense can come through with a lot of big plays. I just don't think I can count on that to happen, which is why I'm going to pick New England to win the game. All right, and that's the first one. Me and Jace kind of both picked New England there. Next game, the LA Rams going to Seattle to play for the 3rd time this season. What is there to say? The Seahawks defensively is the best defense left in this playoffs. I think it was between them and Houston as being the best defenses in the NFL. Seattle, I think the strength of their defense more lies in their secondary than their front 7. I think the front 7 for Houston's a lot better than the Seahawks front 7, but I do think the secondary for the Seahawks is awesome. And I think they know how to play good defense, and they're good on the back end. They tackle, they're physical, and their safeties are really good, and they play some very good defense on the back end. They make it very hard on the quarterback to diagnose the defense and get the ball to the right guy. And if they do, a lot of eyes are on you, and they're ready to pick the ball off at any time, tip passes, and they're ready to take a ball whenever they can. And then offensively, it's going to be for the Seahawks. It's Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold didn't have to do much last week. I think last week he went like 17 of 20 or something like that. He didn't have to throw the football a lot. And he did what he had to do, and he won. They won the game, and he's playing with a torn oblique, which was news coming into last week's game that they played. And it didn't really affect him in that game. Again, it was a blowout. They destroyed the 49ers by 35 points. So I just think that in this game against a much better Rams team, I think we'll put up a much better offensive performance. I think it might require the Seahawks to get a lot more out of Sam Darnold to win this football game. And I think that the running game for the Seahawks has been very good this year. They are going to be playing without Zach Charbonnet, who tore his ACL in that game last week. So all they're going to have is Kenneth Walker as their main guy running the football. But again, he ran the football very well last week against a Niners defense that's nowhere near as healthy as what the Rams is right now. But it's not like the Rams are like awesome at stopping the run. So I do think the Seahawks are going to be able to run the football. It's whether they stick to it and whether the game plan calls for it, because I think that if they let the Rams kind of like get up and down the field, I think that will be an issue that'll stop the Seahawks from being able to play in their game plan. I think what the Seahawks want to do is they want to run the football, and then they want to do play action pass with Sam Darnold and to JSN into those other wide receivers, Rashid Shaheed, and the tight end. Why am I forgetting that guy's name? What is his name? Hold on. It's not that. Tight end, A.J. Barner and Elijah Arroyo, who's coming back off an injury. He'll be another good tight end and guy to throw to. So, that's what they want to do offensively, and I don't think they want Sam Darnold to have to carry the whole offense. That's really not what they want to do offensively, especially with him having the injury. He's not going to be able to run around. He's really going to be a statue back there. So, running the football, letting him do some things off play action is definitely how the Seahawks want to play offensively. But if they have to start slinging the football around, they do have some talented wide receivers to do so. JSN, Cooper Kupp, Rashid Shaheed. They have some dudes. So, it depends on what they want to do. And I think the problem does come in is that if they do have to rely on Sam Darnold to just put the team on his back, he's done it throughout the regular season, but throughout his NFL career, it's yet to be seen in a big time game whether he can actually do that and succeed and do it in a playoff matchup. I just don't think he's really shown that so far in his NFL career. So I think that will be a harder thing, is if they need him to throw the team on his back and throw them to a win. I think that they really want to run the football and keep it balanced in order to kind of keep the Rams on their heels, to stop it from having to only be on Sam Darnold's shoulders. So that'll be yet to be seen, whether the game plan will kind of lend itself towards that, or if they're going to have to rely on Sam Darnold and hope he doesn't choke in the moment, which is what he's done throughout his NFL career in big games. Ask what he did last year with Minnesota, how he played in those 2 big games. They really needed him to be at his best. He didn't do so. So I think the Seahawks, again, I think their defense is awesome. I think their defense can do some really good things, but they're playing against a Rams team that's seen them twice already, and the Rams will not be new to the environment the Seahawks will be playing in. They'll be playing in being the Seahawks home stadium in Washington. I just don't think that in Seattle, Washington. I don't think the Rams will be new to that. Like, they'll know what's coming. They'll be ready for it because they've already seen it before this year, and they've played twice already. And anything that Seahawks defense can do, the Rams had seen that, and Sean McVay as the head coach will be ready to plan for that, and Matthew Stafford's seen that defense before. So I do think both of those guys, there's not really anything the Seahawks will be able to like pull out of the hat that neither of those guys have seen before, and they're both veteran, and they've both been and seen a lot of defenses in their day. And I do think they'll have a real plan to get, Matthew Stafford to be able to get some open throws to Puka Nacua, to Devontae Adams, to that trio of tight ends that they have. And they run the football very well, too, with Kyron Williams and Blake Corum. So they just have so many options to throw the football and run the football with. And if all else fails, Matthew Stafford can really just sling the football around and make good decisions. And he didn't play well last week in a win against the Bears. He didn't play that well. And I just don't expect him to have two bad games in a row, especially against a defense that he has seen so much before. So I do think Matthew Stafford will come into this game ready to go, and he'll be able to play very good football. And it's just, if the Rams can have real balance, I think it'll be impossible for the Seahawks to stop them. But if they have to put the whole game on Matthew Stafford's back to win the game, he can do that. But it's just, can he be his best in this big moment against a very good Seahawks defense will be a good question. Because there's no question Puka Nacua will be able to play a good game because he's been doing that all year long. Off the field, he's been a little bit of a troublemaker, doing some stupid stuff. But on the field, he's been nails all year long. And then you have Devontae Adams, who's the leading touchdown receptions in the NFL. He didn't have a great game last week either. But I think Devontae Adams, Puka Nacua, all those tight ends, they just have so much. They have so many good players that know what to do in big moments that I do think the Rams offense will be raring to go, especially with being led by Sean McVay. Seeing that defense before, they're going to have plenty of plans to be able to get their guys open, especially with those tight ends as well. And running the football with Kyron Williams, I think they have a really good set of weapons all over the place for Matthew Stafford, to where the game doesn't have to be all on his back. He has plenty of dudes to throw to that help alleviate the pressure for him. And then on top of that, on the defensive side of the ball for the Rams, like their secondary is not good. I think their defense line is pretty good. They can get after the passer. I think they'll have some real opportunities to get after Sam Darnold and get him on the ground. And if they can, it'll make it a lot harder for the Seahawks to be able to kind of do what they want to do, running the football and all that. But if the Rams can stop the run and force the Seahawks into, long third downs and having to really put the ball into Sam Darnold's hands, to have to read the defense and not have to make quick throws and let some plays develop, and then it'll give the defense a chance to get after him. And if they do, he's not going to be able to run away from them all that much because of the torn oblique. So I just think that the Rams defense, their whole plan should be to try to stop the run as much as they possibly can, because I do think that's what the Seahawks really want to do, is run the football first. And just force Sam Darnold to have to put the game on his back and to go and win it. And I do think that'll give the Rams the best chance to win, because Sam Darnold, there's still a chance that old Sam Darnold is in there and he might shit down his own leg when the moment gets too big and when the game is truly on the line and on his shoulders. I do think that's going to be an issue. That's going to be the way for the Rams to really have the formula to win. Because if it comes down to quarterbacks, I don't think I'm going on a limb saying I'd take Matthew Stafford over Sam Darnold. But I will say that if Sam Darnold does have to throw, you will have to stop, old boy JSN, because he's an awesome player. He's almost impossible to stop. And I don't believe anybody on that Rams defense will be able to stop him one-on-one. They're going to have to put two guys on him, but that'll only open up the rest of the offense, Cooper Kupp and A.J. Barner, Rashid Shaheed. That'll only open up the offense for those other guys. And again, Cooper Kupp's done it before in big moments, but can Rashid Shaheed, A.J. Barner kind of come out and make some big plays? Elijah Arroyo make some big plays if the Rams put more effort into trying to stop JSN from having a big impact in the game. Can those guys make that defense pay for doing so? That's going to be a big question, but I don't know. Again, the Seahawks defense is the Rams defense secondary is not all that great. So I think this game will really rely on pressure, trying to get after Sam Darnold, stopping the run. And if they can do that, it'll give their defense a chance. But it just, at the end of the day, their secondary has been kind of like, open for business to a certain extent. But if they can stop the run and put the ball into Sam Darnold's hands, they have to go win it for him. Like, he just hasn't really done that much this year. So, and throughout his NFL career, so it is going to be a question. So, Jace has picked Seattle to win that game. I think I'm going to go the Rams. I'm going to go the Rams here because I think Matthew Stafford's been here, done that. I think that the Rams are going to have a really good offensive game plan and be ready to go. I think Puka Nacua is going to be ready to show out along with Devontae Adams, those tight ends, and be able to run the football as well with Kyren Williams and Blake Corum. And I just think that defensively, I know it's going to be a little bit of a lot of trouble with JSN having to deal with him, but I think the Rams will be able, because they've seen that offense before, and because, honestly, ever since that Week 13 game that Sam Darnold had against that Rams defense where he came back at the very end and won it. He didn't really play a great game in that game, and then he came back in overtime. No, was it overtime or at the end of the game? With a 2-point conversion. They were able to get the touchdown, then he won it off the 2-point conversion. Ever since then, Sam Darnold has really regressed, and it really hasn't been as explosive as an offense. And if they can't be explosive and get really big plays on the field, and as long as the Rams can stop the special teams, Rashid Shaheed, he has been a menace all year long, punt returning, kick returning, touchdowns all year long. Last week in San Fran, he did it the very first kickoff of the game, kickoff return touchdown. If the Rams can stop that, and along with that, that's what happened in the last game that the Rams and the Seahawks played, is that they let a kick return touchdown go, or was it punt return? I'm not sure which one it was, but they let Shaheed return one for a touchdown that really swung the game towards Seattle and managed to help them win that one. I think after that, the Rams fired their special teams coordinator and all that because that was a really big deal in that moment to kind of let that one through. So as long as the Rams special teams can stop Rashid Shaheed from having a big game and like impacting it that way and having good returns, I do think that the defense for the Rams can make it hard on Seattle to have to like nickel and dime their way down the field, because I just don't think the big plays are really going to be there, because I just think that they haven't really had a lot of big plays throughout the latter half of this season and through the playoffs so far. They haven't had a lot of big ones. So if they aren't running the football and you have to force them to nickel and dime their way down the field, I think that's going to open up a lot of options for, the Rams to get after Sam Darnold or to help him make a mistake if that team has to put the ball in the hands of Sam Darnold to go win it for him. So I'm going to take the LA Rams. I'm going to take Matthew Stafford to go out there and play a big game after not playing as well last week, along with Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams. I'm going to take the Rams to win that game. I really do. I think for a lot of the year, I've been talking about them as like the best team in the NFL. I've also talked about Seattle being like up there too, with them and with Seattle and the Rams kind of like being the two best teams in the NFL. And I think those two teams, whoever wins that game, will definitely probably be my Super Bowl pick. Again, because I do think it'll be the Patriots on the other side winning their side of the AFC and then getting to the Super Bowl. I just don't want them to win, but I do think the two best teams left in this playoff reside in the NFC, and they're facing off against each other. So whoever wins that game, I do think is going to go win a Super Bowl, and I am going to put my bet in that the Rams will win it. So I'll take the Rams. Jace take the Seahawks in that scenario, and that's about it. So those are the games. I talked about them as much as I possibly can, made our predictions, as well as talked about everything else I wanted to talk about today. So that's about it here. So hopefully you guys had a good time listening to the pod today. I had a good time doing it, and I'm doing it in about 1:40, so not necessarily 2 hours, so I'm doing a little bit better compared to usual. But let's go ahead and finish off the pod. I don't want to make it go any longer. So if you guys have been listening for a while, we appreciate you. If you're just now joining on, hopefully you like us and enjoy us enough to continue to listen to us talk about sports in the dumbest way possible. If this is the first pod you've listened to, make sure you go listen to a different pod with both me and Jason, like the podcast earlier this week, and get a better idea of what we are at our best when we have both of us, me, Jace, brothers, podcast co-host, kind of sitting here talking sports, talking shit, making jokes and all of that. So make sure you go get a better idea if this is the first pod you've listened to, that you go listen to a different pod that can show you what we are at our best with both of us kind of here doing our thing. But if you do like us and enjoy us enough, we would appreciate if you could do a couple things for us. If you could, like our podcast, subscribe to the podcast, rate the podcast 5 stars wherever you listen to us. We're pretty much available on all audio platforms out there, so we shouldn't have any problem finding us on anywhere you listen to your podcasts. And then make sure you share us, friends, family, enemies, anybody you feel like could enjoy the podcast we put out on a weekly basis, with it being 2 times a week during football season. We would love if you can do that. And then last but not least, if you could follow us on Twitter and or X, whatever you'd like to call it, at JB Sports Pod is the podcast handle, at Javante Boozer is my handle, and at Jace Boozer1 is Jace's handle. And that's about it. So I'll go ahead and finish off the pod. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for always listening. And have a great day, have a great night, and see you guys next week. Bye, y'all.